It was a freezing night in Vienna. 1963. A man in a gray overcoat stood beneath a flickering streetlight outside a cafe that had been closed for hours. In his hand was a small envelope, and inside it was microfilm. This tiny piece of film contained a list of every Soviet military advisor stationed in Damascus and Cairo. A few blocks away, a black Volga sedan idled silently with its headlights off. Inside, two men from the KGB's First Chief Directorate watched through the fogged glass. They weren't there for coffee. They were there for blood. The man in the overcoat was a Mossad operative deep undercover, and he was seconds away from being discovered. This is how most of us imagine the Cold War. A silent duel between the CIA and the KGB. But there was a hidden front line the history books often skip. It was a war of spies between Mossad and the KGB waged from the back alleys of Europe to the burning sands of the Middle East. It was a conflict defined by a level of ruthlessness that even Washington and Moscow hesitated to touch. Today, we are opening the classified files on a rivalry that defined modern espionage. This isn't just a story about microdots and poisoned umbrellas. It's the evolution of intelligence tradecraft. This story is the essential prologue to any modern cybercrime documentary, because the tactics born in these Vienna streets have become the code used in today's digital battlefields. Welcome to the Digital Sleuth. I am your host. And if you love true spy stories, internet mysteries, and the technical breakdown of the world's most dangerous operations, you are in the right place. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next classified file. And do me a favor. Tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? I am reading everyone. Now, let us get back to the shadows. For Mossad, this meant their enemies were no longer just across the border. They were being shaped and handled by the KGB itself. By the early 1950s, the KGB had begun recruiting informants in Tel Aviv, embedding them inside Israel's embassies and research institutions. Some were Soviet Jews who had immigrated under false identities. Others were ideological sympathizers or victims of brutal blackmail. Mossad quickly realized this wasn't a traditional spy war. It wasn't just about secrets. It was about control. The first major confrontation happened quietly in 1953. Israeli counterintelligence detected irregular radio transmissions near the Defense Ministry. They traced the signals to a Soviet-built shortwave transmitter hidden inside an apartment rented by a Czech journalist. Within hours, Mossad operatives stormed the flat. The man inside bit down on a cyanide capsule before they could even get him into a chair. The microfilm they recovered changed everything. It contained transcripts of Israeli military communications. The KGB hadn't just knocked on the door. They were already inside the house. Behind the Iron Curtain, the KGB viewed Mossad as a Western pawn operating with American tech, but far fewer scruples. In one declassified analysis, a Soviet officer described Mossad agents as mathematicians with knives. They calculated everything with cold precision, but never hesitated to act with lethal force. Throughout the late 50s and 60s, Vienna, Paris, and West Berlin became chessboards. In 1961, Mossad successfully extracted a Soviet engineer from Czechoslovakia who carried blueprints of a new radar system being installed in Egyptian bases. This system was Soviet-made and thought to be unjammable. Mossad shared this with their Air Force, who devised countermeasures that would prove decisive years later during the Six-Day War. But the KGB retaliated, infiltrating an Israeli research center through Marcus Klingberg, a top medical researcher who secretly passed biological data to Moscow for decades. This wasn't a game of checkers. It was a high-stakes poker game where the losers didn't just lose money. They lost their lives. As the 1,960 seconds turned into the 70 seconds, the secret war moved from a game of surveillance into a deadly contest of recruitment. Neither agency could defeat the other outright, so both turned to the oldest weapon in espionage: people. For Mossad, the advantage was Israel's open door to Soviet Jews. Thousands were immigrating, many with valuable knowledge of Soviet defense. The KGB saw the same opportunity. They planted sleepers, agents disguised as immigrants, sending them into Israel with fake identities to burrow into the government. This created a double-agent ecosystem. You couldn't trust your neighbor, your colleague, or even your fellow officer. This brings us to a crucial point in our cybercrime documentary perspective. If you look at modern phishing attacks or financial fraud mechanics, they follow the exact same psychological profile. They find the vulnerable person, the one with a family to protect or a secret to hide, and they exploit it. In the modern world, the KGB's blackmail has evolved into ransomware and dark web scams. Instead of threatening a relative in Siberia, hackers today use doxing to force cooperation. Take a look at the technical side. Mossad was already using early versions of what we now call cybersecurity protocols. They changed codes weekly, rotated agents like rotating IP addresses, and used airline crews as human firewalls for sensitive data. In Paris, 1968, a KGB station chief hinted he wanted to talk. Mossad sent a clean team with zero ties to the defector to handle the approach. They extracted lists of informants in Lebanon and Syria, leading to a massive roll-up of Soviet spy cells. But the operation ended abruptly when the KGB found out. The station chief disappeared, and his body was never found. This era was a live laboratory. In Cairo and Damascus, KGB officers under diplomatic cover trained Arab services in cryptography and interrogation. Meanwhile, Mossad was busy bribing low-level clerks to smuggle out the very documents the Soviets were teaching the Arabs to protect. By the early 1970 seconds, the shadow war exploded into the light. When the Yom Kippur War erupted in 1973, Mossad and the KGB were locked in invisible combat. Soviet intelligence fed daily updates to Arab command posts, including troop positions and intercepts from Israeli radio channels. But Mossad had a zero-day exploit of their own. Years earlier, they had stolen the technical specs of Soviet cryptographic devices. During the heat of the war, they were reading Egyptian transmissions in real time. The most stunning victory: Mossad technicians jammed Soviet-supplied radar systems in Egypt using technical data stolen a decade prior. They created blind corridors in the sky. The KGB was furious, accusing the Egyptian crews of incompetence, never realizing their own electronics had been compromised. As we look at modern internet mysteries and major hacks, we see this pattern repeated. The Stuxnet attack on Iranian nuclear facilities is a direct descendant of this philosophy. Don't just blow up the machine. Make the machine destroy itself, while the operators watch in confusion. But the KGB wasn't finished. Their Active Measures campaign sought to undermine Israel globally through fabricated stories and forged diplomatic cables. This was the 1970 seconds version of social media disinformation. Inside Israel, the KGB even managed to plant moles who sent details about the nuclear program in Dimona. The discovery of these networks triggered internal Mossad purges. Trust was the first casualty. They realized that in a war of perception, you don't need to win the battle if you can convince the world the other side is the villain. By the late 1980 seconds, the Soviet Union was collapsing. But the KGB's Middle Eastern network didn't just vanish. It went into the gray zone. When the Berlin Wall fell, files were burned and agents were abandoned. Mossad agents moved quickly. recruiting disoriented ex-KGB officers who suddenly needed a paycheck. The hunters became the informants. The legacy of this war is everywhere in our digital age. The mathematicians with knives have become the coders with exploits. The battle for information hasn't ended. It has just moved to the cloud. As the Digital Sleuth, I have analyzed thousands of cases of cybercrime and dark web scams. The common thread, the same human weaknesses the KGB exploited in Vienna, are the ones hackers exploit today. Here is your takeaway for digital survival. First, practice zero trust. In the spy world, trust but verify is a death sentence. In the digital world, assume every unsolicited link is a blackmail attempt. Second, update your blueprints. Mossad won because they had the latest specs of Soviet tech. You win by keeping your software and security protocols updated. Finally, protect your identity. The KGB used sleeper identities. Today, your identity is sold on the dark web for a few dollars. Use multi-factor authentication and biometric locks to ensure you are the only one in your embassy. The Cold War may be over, but the methods remain. From cyber warfare in Ukraine to proxy battles in the Middle East, the fingerprints of these old spy masters are everywhere. If you want to see more on how these historical tactics have evolved into modern cyber warfare, check out our deep dive on state-sponsored hacking. I am the Digital Sleuth. Keep your data encrypted and your eyes open. I will see you in the next investigation. Sign off. The Digital Sleuth.